Hello, listeners. Jordan here. I just want to let you know that you can listen to Nighttime early and ad-free on Amazon Music. Include it with Prime.
You are listening to the Nighttime Podcast.
Hello, listeners, and welcome to Nighttime's 2023 Halloween special. Actually, calling this a special is probably an understatement. I've been looking forward to this all month, so let's call it a Halloween extra special. As you've probably heard in my prior episodes, I've been somewhere between inviting and begging listeners to share their personal encounters with the supernatural. And boy, let me just tell you, y'all are haunted, just as I expected. And tonight, we're going to hear all about it. So let's get right into this. Pour yourself a drink, dim the lights, and get cozy. Tonight, in this Halloween special, I'll be joined for the first time by both Aaron Airport from Keep Canada Weird and Miss Madelayne Klein. Together, the three of us are going to explore that soft gray mist that divides the living from the dead, and we'll do it in the context of the amazing nighttime listeners who share their encounters with the beyond. Handsome Aaron Airport, Miss Madelayne Klein, my worlds are colliding, and we're all here together on, let's pretend it's Halloween night. How are you both doing, Aaron?
I'm feeling spooky.
Oh, Madelayne.
I guess I'm feeling spooky too. I've been looking forward to this. So.
I'm so excited. Madelayne, you got
easy, buddy.
You've got the spirit of Halloween going on. You have a shirt that represents the holiday, but it has a subtle nod to your baby.
It's got a little baby skeleton on it.
I didn't see that until you stood up.
So the shirt is kind of like the bones on the shirt, but underneath the rib cage, there's the little skeleton of a baby.
Yeah,
that's cool.
Little baby X-ray. So I'm gonna wear it to work next week.
So we need to figure out the dynamic here. I know Aaron. I know Madelayne, but I've never had the three of us together. So when we get into these stories shared from our haunted listeners, who is the skeptic? Who's the believer? Who is the stick in the mud that thinks the whole thing's hogwash? Aaron, what are your thoughts on?
I tend to gravitate towards being a muddy stick, but
yeah, that's true.
We'll see how the stories go. I do always keep 5% of my mind is open.
How about you, Madelayne? You've told me before that you went to a fortune teller.
I've gotten my palms read a couple times.
Yeah, that's what it was.
I've gotten my palms read. I definitely believe in the supernatural and ghosts and everything. I've never had really an experience. But usually when someone tells me their own experience, I'm not skeptical. I'm like, oh, well, I have nothing to compare it to, really.
Yeah, it is. I guess it's one of those things that seeing is believing. And if you haven't seen one, the best you can do is just have an open mind. I don't think I've ever really seen a ghost, but I would say definitively I am a believer that there is more to life in living and death than just an on-off switch, coming and going.
There's gotta be.
It's cruel if there isn't. If you just die and that's the end of it. But
and maybe it's as simple as a different dimension. Who knows?
But if you think about death in the sense of it is a light switch, it doesn't matter at that point because you just don't. You're just not.
Yeah, but I think that question of is there life after death, I think is bigger than us as individuals. It's about fairness for all of humanity. And if we just live for the point of with the purpose of just breeding and then quietly dying, I don't think that's right. But here's my thoughts, or I don't think that's fair. But here's kind of my thoughts on why there could be ghosts and why that could exist. And I think I've talked about this on the show before, but I have this idea that whatever makes life, when life is created, and you're a living human being, there's some kind of electrical current inside our bodies that compels our heart to beat and allows our brains to function and our nervous system to work. And there's just this little bit of electricity that's just keeping the whole thing alive. And that's really what makes life. And when you die, that bit of electricity stops making your body work, but it has to go somewhere. Like it will dissipate into the, into the room at the hospital or something, but it doesn't just disappear, because that's not how electricity works. And I think
you're talking about a soul, no?
Yeah, but I think it's electrical in nature. I don't know why.
Ultimately, I think it's our fear of death that allows us to be open-minded to ghosts, afterlife. In order for us to function as a society, in order for us to be motivated to keep going, we can't be told that we can't truly believe that it's lights out, nothing for us in 40 years, 50 years. But ultimately, unfortunately, I think it's just a lights out situation.
Death that used to be one of my really big things until I got on Zoloft. Death used to really scare me because I'm like, we're all going to die. I think you're onto something with the whole life after death. It's a comfort thing for the living.
I guess we'll never know. And if either of us, let's make a pact right now. If either of us do die ever, I'm sure one of us will sometime in our lives. And you have the ability to interact with humans, let the other two know what's going on. Okay.
But I have a pact like this with my brother. So yeah, I'll add you guys.
Yeah. It's like a Facebook group of some kind.
Let us know what happens.
Yeah.
Well, let's get into it here. We have a huge collection of listener contributed stories of encounters with the beyond, with ghosts, with the paranormal, with the supernatural. But before we get into the listener contributed stories, which I'm so excited for because they're awesome, we got one voicemail that's a listener making us hip to a bit of Halloween news that somehow I missed. That they're presenting it as if it's a new article that was just published by CBC, but it's actually a couple years old, but it's still an amazing story. This is a listener named Trish from the US who saw an interesting piece of Canadian news. Listen to this.
Hello, it's Trish from Connecticut. I read in CBC that Bathurst, New Brunswick has an age limit for trick-or-treaters. It used to be 14, now it's up to 16. So if you know about that town, you can ask for their ID, I guess. Take care. Thanks.
What Trish is saying is that she saw on the news that Bathurst has, I guess, regulates trick-or-treating to some extent, and they've upped the age from 14 to 16 for who can trick-or-treat. And I thought...
Like who? Who's they?
The city, I guess. Bathurst, New Brunswick.
The mayor of Bathurst.
Bathurst, New Brunswick regulates, and it's true. She's right. They regulate trick-or-treating. They regulate Halloween. So I went being like, is there some new article I missed? It was actually in 2017. There was a big debate because the bylaws in Bathurst prohibited anyone over 14 years old from trick-or-treating. But a couple years back, I think 2017, they raised that age from 14 to 16. I found a news piece where they're talking about this regulation changing. Listen to this.
The rules may have been relaxed, but a Halloween bylaw in Bathurst is still stirring the witch's pot. The revamped regulations ban trick-or-treating for anyone older than 16, with an 8 p.m. curfew and fines up to $200 for wearing a disguise in public after the 8 o'clock cutoff.
As long as you're dressed up, I think it should be okay. If you can still go trick-or-treating, if you're still young at heart and you still want to do it.
The bylaw previously halted trick-or-treating at 14 years old and set the citywide curfew at 7. Bathurst police say there have been some incidents with older kids in the past, but they'll be taking a common-sense approach this year, only using fines as a last resort.
I don't think we have to worry too much that everybody that we see out and about after the curfew is going to be ticketed. It'll be very much on a case-by-case basis.
On Monday night, councillors voted unanimously to loosen the restrictions on the Halloween bylaw, but the city declined to comment today. However, its deputy mayor has called to scrap the bylaw altogether in the past. The city faced vicious online comments after the unusual bylaw received international attention earlier this year. On the streets today, every person we spoke to had something to say, just not on camera, proving online backlash may be more frightening than the Halloween haunts of witches and ghouls.
The government getting involved in trick or treating, regulating it.
Just they're a bunch of killjoys.
They are a bunch of killjoys, but I think society has a way to deal with the teenagers who are, too old to be out trick or treating. We don't answer our doors when it gets 7 or 8 o'clock. Usually for me, it's around 8:30. I turn off my lights so my property's all dark and people won't come to my door. That's how I handle it. For the city, is there not bigger fish to fry in Bathurst than how old you are to trick or treat? And imagine getting that fine, like a $200 fine for being 16 and trick or treating.
Yeah,
I can't believe
they'd have to
that.
find you a job first so you can then pay the fine, because I don't know any
Seriously.
any 16-year-old that's going to be able to afford that. But see, to me, I fear the teenagers. And the
I know you
last
do.
thing I want to do is upset them, especially on Halloween when they're loaded with spray cans, eggs, toilet paper. So if a 16, 17-year-old, 18-year-old comes to my door, they're getting twice as much as the 7-year-old did, because I just want to keep them happy. It's like the mayor paying off a crime lord or something. Just please, leave my family, my yard alone, just whatever you want. How many coffee crisps will it take?
It's free candy day. You two could show up at my door and I'd be like, here you go.
Yeah. You go to businesses, like I got some Twizzlers today from Vogue Optical.
I think as long as people are in costume, I have no problem with it. Yeah, and I've had much older than 16 come up to my door. And if they're in a costume and they're cool, yeah, I'll throw a bunch of candy in their bag. Great.
Like, I would much rather just go buy the candy instead of hauling my ass around in -20 weather.
Yeah, that's true. They're working for it.
Yeah.
Well, with that behind us, we have the table cleared for the listener contributed stories of encounters with the beyond. Are you both prepared to get into this? I'm worried that someone's going to get scared.
Oh, I'm ready. I'm good. I don't think I'll get scared per
Aaron,
se.
you don't like horror. You're like a comedy guy. Can you handle this?
Yeah, I can handle it. Yeah, I can handle it.
Okay, well, let's see. For people who don't know what we're getting into, every year I do this where I put the call out to listeners to share with us their stories. So what we're going to go through now is the stories we've received. Let's begin with, let's start with Kara's trials and tribulations as an estate lawyer's daughter. Do you know what an estate lawyer is?
Like when someone dies, this person's responsible for their
estate. Yeah, dealing with their affairs. So Kara, who's sending this voice memo, her father is or was an estate lawyer. And, if you're an estate lawyer, by nature, you're dealing with death, people who've died. So I'm not surprised that it got her into some trouble. Listen to this.
Hi, Jordan, Madelayne, and Aaron Airport. This is Kara. I called a couple of weeks ago. I'm one of your listeners from North Carolina. First of all, I am so excited that the three of you are having a Halloween show together. You all have such good chemistry on the air with each other. Now you get to meet each other virtually. Anyway, I wanted to tell you for the Halloween special about my single encounter with the paranormal. It happened in the 80s in a small town in North Carolina called Rocky Mount. Maybe had about 50,000 people living there at the time. I was in high school when it happened. My dad, who has since passed away, was an estate lawyer, and he had been hired by a relative of a man who had actually been murdered by his wife. My dad was supposed to administer the estate, sell the property, pay the creditors, that type of thing. And so the couple's home was going to be auctioned. According to my dad, who told me this story later, the wife came into the bedroom one night while her husband was sleeping and killed him with a shotgun at close range. They had a couple of small children who were not in the house when it happened. They were staying with relatives, and whether that was deliberate on the mother's part, I don't think anyone knows, but at any rate, the mother had been arrested and was sitting in jail waiting for trial when all this happened. So that's just to give you some background. So because the auction was scheduled the next day, my dad wanted the yard to look nice, and he dropped me off to mow the lawn. He gave me the key to the back door. He showed me where the lawnmower was. He told me that he'd be back in an hour, and he said if I needed to go in to take a break or get some water, I could do that. As I recall, the electricity had already been turned off. Nobody was living there anymore, but the water was still on. Just to describe the house, it was kind of a working class suburban neighborhood, 2 stories. It was the end of a cul-de-sac, separated a little from the other houses, but there were no close homes around it. So I started mowing. It was hot. It was very quiet on the street. There were no sounds of neighbors or children. It was just me and the lawnmower. So I'm out there by myself for about 10 minutes. That's it. When all of a sudden I had the strongest feeling someone was watching me. Not just watching me, but watching me from the darkened upstairs window in the house. I glanced up at the window. I didn't see anything, so I just kept going, just, kind of wanting to finish as soon as I could. I worked a little bit longer and at some point realized I was sweating and hot and needed to go in and get some water from the inside. So I let myself in the back with the key, and it was objectively weird in the house when I stepped in. First of all, for being mid-July, it was frigid in the house, especially since the power had already been turned off. I mean, the house had some trees around it, but not enough to throw a ton of shade. That was the first thing I noticed. The second thing I noticed were all the family pictures on the wall. A lot of pictures, different sizes, different placements of the pictures on the wall. Not a single one of those pictures downstairs, because that's the only place I went into the house, was straight. All the pictures were tilted at what looked like the same 45 or so degree angle to the left. So they're all tilted to the left, all these family pictures. So I'm thinking, okay, it's a little weird. I'm just trying to get my water and get out of there when I heard footsteps from upstairs. It was soft. It sounded like someone was shuffling across the floor slowly. I mean, you have to understand, this house was empty. There were no pets. There were no people there. It was just me. It couldn't have gone on that long, a few seconds. But as I'm standing there listening, I'm getting a little horrified because, this was not really what I'd signed up for. So I just walked out. That was enough. I locked the door. I walked back into the backyard. The temperature immediately jumped the second I stepped out of the house. I'd almost finished the lawn. I was about to start the mower again. And something made me look up at the second story in the house, and I will never forget it. I saw what looked like a dark human shape in the window of the upstairs room, just there. Couldn't make out any details. At that point, because I'm just a high schooler, I left the lawnmower in the middle of the lawn. I walked up to the street and waited for my dad to get me. He did. He wanted to know why I hadn't quite finished. I didn't tell him everything. I just said the house was creepy and I was done. And I never went back, not even when they had the auction the next day. So that's it. That's my one supernatural experience. Years later, I tried to look up the name of the woman who was charged and convicted of murder, but it happened in the 80s, and that was before things were routinely digitalized. I couldn't find anything. My dad has since passed away, so I couldn't get any details from him, but it was really odd. Anyway, still love the show, all the shows. Take care and happy Halloween.
Thank you, Kara. That, for one, she's an incredible storyteller.
Oh, I like her accent.
Yeah, she's got like the Stephen King vibe. Like she could be in a Stephen King movie telling that story.
Yeah, she's almost like the woman you run into at the general store, like the people who are coming from out of town into this, like maybe they're a journalist or something and they're coming to inspect a story of some kind, and then they stop for gas at this.
That does, it sounds Stephen King-esque.
Yeah. I inherited a house, and she's like, oh, the old Burns property.
Yeah. Like, oh, you know of it? Yeah.
Yeah, I can see that going. But as far as her story, remember at the beginning, I said I had this idea about like electricity or energy. Madelayne said, you're talking about a soul or a spirit or whatever. If you die in this brutal, sudden, unexpected way, your body hasn't had, like your death hasn't had this long period of like sickness and old age for that electrical current to dissipate slowly. It's just released all at once. And I think that's why places where traumatic things have happened are more likely to be haunted. And I feel like if this whole story is absolutely accurate, this man asleep in his bed who's killed by his wife, his soul or his energy or whatever was at full strength. So it's just released into that room to just kind of, I guess, slowly dissipate over the years. And she, as a young girl, is outside mowing for her father as I think that man is just watching her from the window, being like, "What the hell is this kid doing?" He's probably shouting and banging on the window, but he can't physically interact with it to allow her to hear it. But she can sense being watched, and she looks up, and sure enough, she sees him. I think this story is chilling. Madelayne, what are your thoughts on this?
Oh, well, I think his soul is trapped in the house, and he's
Mm.
probably angry that he died in such a way.
Absolutely. And if you are like your soul and you can think and still feel emotion and stuff when you're stuck there, I'm sure he's pissed. He's probably wondering where his kids are,
I would
what's
be.
happening with his house. They're probably moving stuff in and out of the house for the estate sale. You know, and as she mentioned, she's preparing the yard for the estate sale or whatever. So he's really going to have a hard time over the next few days when all the furniture and everything else gets lugged out of there. And then new owners are going to move in. I'd like to get them on the show to get their thoughts.
Oh,
Well,
What they
yeah.
experience.
you're basically explaining the story of Beetlejuice. You know, when they die, the couple dies, and then they're in the attic the whole
Yes.
time, where the new owners are taking over the house, and they're making all of these changes, and they're just kind
Mm.
of stuck there to watch it until they decide they're going to haunt the place to try and get them out of there.
Yes, I forgot. And you know what? There's actually like work is being done right now for Beetlejuice 2.
It is, that's right, yes, and he's returning as Beetlejuice.
And as well as I can't think of the actress's name, but she was the lead character in Wednesday.
Jenna something.
Ortega.
Yeah.
Jenna
Yeah.
Ortega. I think she's going to be in it. I'm
Mhm.
excited for it because I love Beetlejuice.
Oh,
Maybe
yeah.
that's why this story brought my mind in
Really
that
spoke
direction.
to you, yeah. There's so many
Um,
details about the story that I'd like to know.
Like what?
I'd like to know why she killed him, because I think the reason as to why she killed him determines if he sticks around haunting or not.
Maybe Madelayne can help. Madelayne, why would a woman kill a man? I'm sure you've come close a few times.
Oh, yes. It's definitely gone on in my mind.
That's what I'm doing a half an hour from now.
Yeah. There's an array of reasons. Good,
Yeah.
bad, petty. But I imagine because this guy was a dad, he was probably leering out the bedroom window and she was doing the lawn and he was probably like, "My lawn, you're doing it wrong."
Yeah.
I go in circles, not in lines.
I thought that was an amazing story, but we have a whole bunch more. We have a bunch more amazing stories. That didn't feel right coming out. A whole bunch more of amazing stories.
Yeah, your words are haunted tonight.
That one mentioned a father because it was her dad that brought her there, and it was the father who was murdered and probably the one haunting the house. Got a few more stories that mention fathers, but maybe I'll save one for a little bit. Let's jump over to Ken. Ken has a story that I called Ken's Night Visitor. This relates to reoccurring visitations happening in Ken's home at night, and Ken's pretty sure he knows what the visitor wants. Buckle up for this one.
Hi, Jordan. Ken Wilkie here, longtime fan of the podcast. You were asking if anyone had any experience with the paranormal. Anyway, I was laying in bed one night, and I opened my eyes and I looked, and there was a young girl about 8 years old in a long flannel nightgown came into my bedroom and just walked to the foot of my bed, and she was standing there looking at me. Then she'd look at the dresser and then look back at me, and I'd reach over to wake my wife up, and then it'd be gone. So anyway, that went on. It was like 3 nights in a row. This girl kept coming in my room. She'd walk to the foot of the bed, look at the dresser, look at me, back and forth, back and forth. Anyway, I happened to be chatting with one of my friends one afternoon there, and we got talking about the occult and whatnot. And I was telling them about it, and I mean, we built the house. The house was built on old farmland, so it's not like there was ever anything here before. So, and like I say, we built the house. So, anyway, he asked me if we had taken anything in to the home recently, and I got thinking that my dad he was going to a lot of estate auctions and just bringing home all kinds of antiques and whatnot. And he had brought home a walking doll, but it was a size that I'd never seen before. It was only about 8-9 inches high and fairly stout. But anyway, when you moved the legs and the arms, they moved. So anyway, we came to the conclusion that it's this doll that I had put in the top drawer because it needed repair. So anyway, I took it out and I repaired it and I put it back in the toy box, and I've never seen the girl again, and I've never thrown the doll away either.
Okay, that was. I think that story was chilling for a variety of reasons. First, another story involving a dad and an estate sale. I don't think this is connected to the prior estate sale that we heard of, but this idea that he brought home this little antique toy, had it in his dresser, and clearly, we know what's going on. It was that little girl's toy, and she was coming, and she'd look at him, look at the dresser, look at him, look at the dresser, almost to say, like, can you get out of that bed and get that thing from your dresser? Because I can't do it. But what I think is maybe the most chilling about the whole thing is he goes on and he fixes the toy, and that's enough to satisfy her.
That's like cute and sad all at the same time.
It is kind of cute, but do you think, like, I think he's right. It was bringing in this little antique from an estate sale. You're asking to get haunted, Ken. What puzzles me is why repairing it would be enough to satisfy her.
She wants to play with it.
Oh, does she play with it? Yeah. I wonder if she's
Maybe
there
she's
playing
bored.
with it, plays with it every night in his room while he's sleeping.
Yeah, he's got to be careful here, though, because the more he does for this ghost child, the more it's going to want from him. So at first he repairs a toy, and then she's like, oh yeah, like, this is he fixed my toy, and then next thing you know, he's putting her through college.
Oh gosh.
I think the toy had sentimental value.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Madelayne, for providing balance between Aaron and
I. You are the bridge. I have a theory, though, as to what I actually think is going on here.
Okay, lay it on us.
So I think this gentleman, this caller, is suffering from a light case of sleep paralysis. So with sleep paralysis, you kind of wake up, but your body doesn't really wake up, but your brain is still kind of in sleep mode, like it's in dream mode, and it's still kind of showing you. It can kind of play really creepy tricks on you. I have a few friends that kind of struggled with it throughout their lives a bit. And one friend, and what made me think about this is because he said they just kind of built this home or whatever. Sometimes a change of environment, like you move into a new place, and people can experience it then. But there was a friend of mine who moved into a new apartment and started to have sleep paralysis, where he'd wake up, he couldn't move, but he could see everything in the room. But then there would be like the curtains would turn into like a creature of some kind, and it would be coming at him. Wow. Sometimes a lot of people see, like, they call them the shadow people. That's like the kind of stereotypical version of sleep paralysis, but it can occur in kind of all different ways. And so you can have even as innocent of images as a young kind of ghostly looking girl showing up in your bedroom.
I think my sister used to get that. She used to just like see stuff in her room, but it didn't scare her. She would just like wake up and be like, what the hell? Like I remember she saw the Burger King guy once. And I was like, you weren't scared.
Yeah.
You're just hungry.
Exactly. It can be as ridiculous as that. And it's just that transition from sleep into being awake. There's a bridge there, and sometimes your body gets there before your brain does, and there's just a kind of a translation issue, and you see things.
I did like the part of the story where Ken's like, I was talking to a friend and we got onto the topic of the occult. He just says, like, how did you get in that topic with your friend? I've never had the occult come up in a conversation.
I was going to say that happens to me and my friends all the time.
So I was under a bridge and I was talking to this troll, and after I answered the third riddle, we got onto the occult there, and
much like our prior caller, though, I thought Ken was a great storyteller. I loved his voice and his delivery. It added so much color to his recounting of these events. Ken, I appreciate you sharing that story with us. That's the second story in a row that mentioned a father, because Ken's dad was involved in bringing home that item. This next one, actually, I'm going to save. I have one that involves a father. It also involves pregnancy in a way. We'll save that for the end because I'm excited for Madelayne to hear that one. I want to build up to that. Let's get into. Let's go into haunted homes abroad. We have two stories that involve listeners of Nighttime spending time in haunted houses in other parts of the world. Do you guys want to go to Mexico or Sweden? Let's do a vote. All who want to go to Sweden, say aye.
Aye.
Yeah, I want to go to Sweden too.
Okay, aye. Sweden it is. What we're going to hear about is Jacqueline's haunted time in Sweden. Here we go.
Hi guys, this is a submission for a ghost story. It's more of a haunting, but still. I used to live in Sweden. Sweden's very old, goes back to Viking times, so properties there can be very old. And, Nova Scotia, the oldest houses are a couple 100 years old, so just to kind of think in context there. And people have a very, very healthy belief in the paranormal. So much so that it's a common practice to remove the roof of your house upon moving in to let the spirits out. Common practice. People do it all the time. My boyfriend was a contractor, so that was, something you do. You move into a new house. If it's old, people talk about ghosts, you take the roof off, let them out, and then you live happily ever after in your new house. So I was staying in a guest house in on a farm, like an old farmhouse. This roof had not been removed because my friends were constantly renovating the main house, and it's expensive. So I lived there for months, and the things that I experienced living there were insane. So it started off with, footsteps. You'd hear footsteps when my friend wasn't upstairs. You would hear what sounded like people moving furniture. You'd hear, it's a very distinct sound, someone moving a chair or a table across the floor above you. And I would hear that regularly. We all did. You would hear people speaking upstairs that weren't there, and vice versa. My friend upstairs would call us while I was at work and say, you're not home, right? Because I can hear terrifying whispers coming from your guys' room downstairs. And I know you guys aren't home, but I'm just, making sure I'm not crazy. So we would hear voices, we would hear movement, but I wouldn't be scared of that. It was strange. I wouldn't be terrified. However, like on scary movies, they say don't pay attention to evil spirits because that seems to make it worse. So I tried to just ignore when I was really scared. It started again at 3:00 in the morning. I would wake up and my boyfriend wouldn't. It seemed like I could not wake him up, and there'd be like banging sounds, like almost like the sound of someone like knocking on the door in the walls. And there weren't pipes there or anything. Like this house was moved several times in its history on logs with horses pulling it. So there's not a lot going on inside the walls. And some days, like one day I remember being completely alone in the house during the daytime, and it sounded like a kid or like a teenager burst through the door and ran up the stairs. Very distinct sound, like your mom would probably yell out and scream at you for a sound that you would make like that in a house. But there was no one there. Anyway, there was just so many things trying to keep everything in order. But so things came to a head because this was waking me up constantly. I felt like my mental health was starting to go down the drain. It was getting worse and worse. I was getting more and more scared. And one day in the middle of the day, I remember I was cooking porridge on a hot pot, like one of those, ones you have in your dorm room. And it sounded like someone like banging on the door, but like in the wall right across from me. And I started singing Spider-Man to myself to ignore it. And I was like, Spider-Man, Spider-Man. And I just kept like being like, I'm not paying attention. I'm not giving any attention. And it got louder and louder and louder. And that feeling of fear, and it was a bright sunny day. Like it was like 11 o'clock in the morning. Anyway, I was so scared. I can't even describe the fear. It got so loud, the banging. It started engulfing the entire room, shaking things, like things were falling off the wall. I ran from the house. I ran into the main house. I left my porridge boiling on the little hot pot, and she said, leave it. I hope it burns that whole place down. Don't go back in there. Like I had support at least, and they are not like crazy people, like, like very, like, they're very normal people. And anyway, we moved out of there, and my poor friend lived in there forever, but he's just made peace with the fact that happens. But yeah, that was my very intense ghost encounter. I don't have any explanation for it. I could go on for days of all of the things that happened in that house, but I don't have time to tell all of it. But it was wild, and I've never experienced anything like that since. So.
Oh, man. When you hear a story like that, my first thought being what I consider to be a reasonable, logical person, I think just as she described, pipes in the walls, or I don't know, the house is warming up or it's settling, or, who knows, something like that going on that's causing the thing to make noise. But what she describes is altogether different. She's made a point at several moments during that voice memo to say like it was very specific sounds. It wasn't just these vague rumblings. It was feet running up the stairs, or the sound of a table being pulled across the floor. I think this sounds like a haunted house. Madelayne, what's your verdict on this?
Well, she even provided really good sound effects.
Oh yeah, the bo, bo, bo. Yeah, she did amazing.
Oh yeah, and it sounds like she, at the beginning, she tried to be rational and be like, what could this be? But yeah, that's super creepy. And there's something about the aspect of it happening in the middle of the day, because like when you watch a scary movie, and this seldom happens, but when it takes place in the middle of the day, that's somehow more scary, because you expect scary things to happen at night, but you find safety in the daylight, I guess, and that just throws everything off.
Also, the night is generally quieter, and there's less going on, so your mind can wander. It's quieter, so you can hear little things and maybe allow them to get exaggerated in your mind. But in the day, even the pace of life is a little different. For something to happen like that in the day, yeah, it definitely hits differently. What about taking the roof off of a house to allow spirits to be released? Here on Atlantic, Canada, you hear of smudging a home, which is like a specific type of, I don't know what kind of like leaves it is, but you burn these certain leaves, and the idea is, yeah, sage.
Isn't that like I thought that was like an Aboriginal.
It is, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, but you can smudge a home, you can, it's kind of cleanse the area.
That's a whole lot easier than taking the roof off of a house. Is a pretty extreme step to take.
That sounds expensive.
Oh, absolutely. It's expensive to put new shingles on it. Imagine taking the whole thing off to allow. Could the spirit not go out the door, the window? Give people a break.
I also don't think that's how
open the
works.
windows. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know.
But
that is a lot to go through to do that. But yeah, I was trying the whole time. I was trying to think of logical things that could be Because, when I thought about, okay, is it pipes? But then she said there's no pipes in the place. Then I was like, maybe it's like raccoons or something. But I'm like, well, what do they have raccoons in Sweden? I don't know. Like,
Probably not.
Yeah, I'm sure they have some
Just
vermin of some
IKEA's.
kind. Yeah. So, but none of it was really matching. And then I thought, okay, well, is she, kind of falling in and out of sleep in the nighttime? Is her mind playing tricks on her? But then when she mentioned the daytime thing, her making porridge, I was like, okay, this is happening 11 o'clock in the morning. She's wide awake. None of those explanations would really cover that. So it kind of boils down to, I don't know. I'd have to be there to see the house and see the area.
Well, I will say this. I've heard enough to know that I do not want to go stay in her friend's guest house in Sweden. I wouldn't take my chances. Something's going on there.
You never know when something's living in the walls, whether it's a ghost or not. You never know when there's some kind of whether it's a person or an animal, or sometimes could be anything.
Okay, interesting. Let's go to another, possibly, in this case, I think very likely, haunted house. This one is in Mexico. This is a story that a listener named Angel shares. And this is unique because I think it involves either a haunted house or a haunted punching bag. Listen to this.
Hey, Jordan. So I want to share a ghost / paranormal story experience that happened to me when I was around, I was probably like 11, maybe 11, 12 years old. I lived in Mexico back then, and there was this classmate of ours who was really rich, and she had this big mansion. It was like several blocks. That's how big the mansion was, and rumors around town were always that it was really haunted because it was really a really old mansion. And she invited us over, like me and a couple of other kids. Obviously, what we wanted as children was to see if we experienced any ghost like things, experiences or whatever. So one of the things we went at some point, a couple of us, the most courageous ones, decided to go down into the basement. And so we went down there, and there were no lights. So I think we just had like a flashlight or something. So this was a long time ago, but we had a flashlight, and it was like a big long corridor that we were walking through in the basement, right? And there were rooms to the sides of the corridor. And I remember distinctly walking past one of the doors to one of the rooms, and turning to see what was inside of that dark room, and there was just a big punching bag just hanging there off of the ceiling, just completely hanging there, completely still. And whatever, we just keep walking past there, and then all of a sudden I like the person that was walking behind me, he like freezes, or he makes a noise, and something causes me to turn to look at him. And I look at him, and he's staring with a face of just utter terror, looking into the room that I had just looked into, where the bag was hanging off of, right? So I, having just seen the room and seen that there was nothing weird there, go back and look back into the room again, and I notice what he's looking at, and the punching bag is inexplicably swinging from one side of the ceiling to the other very violently, very literally hitting the ceiling. And those things are heavy, very heavy. And so it's not something that, any of us could have done. The moment I saw that punching bag, my reaction was not to freeze like my friend was, frozen. My reaction was just to bolt, right? So I just ran out of there, And my reaction, my running out of there and going back upstairs, of course, caused the entire group to just freak out, and everyone just started running. And yeah, so that was, I mean, we that was the scariest thing and the most paranormal thing that's ever happened to me. Um, so yeah, I mean, we definitely got what we wanted by going to that, haunted mansion. Uh, and to this day, it's unexplained. I don't know what it was that caused that. Uh, but yeah, it was, it was one of those things that I will never forget. Anyways, love the podcast, and happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween to you, Angel. I think when I hear that story, I think my mind immediately goes to like someone was screwing with these kids.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I immediately thought of. Is someone knew they were down there and tried to get a rise out of them,
But it would
and was
work.
very successful.
Yeah, if you're down in a dark, cold basement of some building, and there's just a punching bag just hanging there, and then seconds later, without anyone else around, it's just swinging, hitting the floor joists above it. If someone was screwing with them, it had to be someone strong. Like you would really need to put your weight into pushing something like that, unless it was a small punching bag. But they're usually those are big, heavy things.
Yeah, usually they are. They're pretty. Maybe you would have to be big and strong to do that. So I don't know. I mean, again, this happened a long time ago as well, too. So I'm sure there could be a bit of the memory probably tells it differently than how it actually happened as well. So that tends to happen too. Over the years, the story always slightly alters over time. The more you remember it, the more it slightly changes. So maybe it wasn't quite hitting the rafters when it was swinging. Maybe it was swinging, but it was,
Every year, every time he tells it, it's swinging a little
swinging
harder.
a little more each time.
There was 100 punching bags.
Yeah, all of them swinging in different directions.
Well, this reminded me of so we have there's a little town called Weyburn, like an hour and a half away. And I don't know if it's there anymore, but there was like this old abandoned mental institution it was called Fort San. And so of course it was very popular for whatever teens to go and look around and scare themselves.
Did you ever go there?
I didn't, no.
Okay.
I think I always had better things to do. And also I did not want to trespassing. Like someone owned it and you could get in trouble for trespassing on it. I know one girl that actually fell out of a window there because she got and broke her collarbone because a pigeon scared her. But anyway, one of my really good friends, when she was in high school, her and her friend got some sort of special permission. I think they were with one of their moms, but it was for a school project. They got to stay overnight in Fort San. I don't know what the hell this project was for, but they got permission from the owner to stay there. And lo and behold, some kids come when they're there and they were like, oh, let's screw with them. So they did. They were making all these noises and whatever, and were very successful. But yeah, now there's a group of kids that have a ghost story that isn't actually a ghost story.
Wow. That would be an amazing opportunity to be there and just see you're looking out like the upstairs window and you see a couple kids coming in. Yeah, I'd be like,
and
here we go.
It fit it was a very stereotypical, like haunted. There was like old gurneys and yeah, it was just
abandoned mental hospital.
Was it a mental hospital or but there was also a
medical hospital,
like a TB hospital, abandoned. Yeah, we got a couple good properties around.
Well, I've heard the whole state of Saskatchewan is haunted by something. Something social.
It's haunted. I was going to say it's being haunted now by living people.
Let's get into the next one here. We got a short story. This involves Sherry's daughter's ghost. A listener named Sherry her daughter seemed to have an ability to connect with those maybe between worlds. Listen to this.
Hi, my name's Sherry. My husband and Don and I are avid listeners to your show. I just want to tell you about something that happened with our daughter when she was 4 for your Supernatural podcast. So we were staying at a friend's cottage, Pete, and he shared the cottage with his mom. But his mom had passed away a couple years before we went up. While we were there, I was writing a recipe from one of her cookbooks, and my daughter came up to me, asked me what I was doing, and I told her about Pete's mom and how she had passed away and was up in heaven. Well, my daughter said to me, "No, she's not up in heaven. She's right here." And I was like, "In this room?" And she said, "Yes, she's right over there." So I didn't know what to say. I just let it go and forgot about it. And a few weeks later, when we were at home, she came up to me and she said to me, "Pete's mom wants to know how you like that recipe." Well, that freaked me right out. So I just said to her, "Just tell Pete's mom I haven't made it yet."
That's the end.
Oh.
I want to know so much more about that story, but for her daughter to bring it up at Pete's place not long after Sherry told her daughter, Pete's mom passed away, for her daughter to bring it up then, I'm not that surprised because it'd be fresh in her mind. But for a 4-year-old to bring it up weeks later, specifically, like, how was the recipe? Yeah, I don't know. I'd be pretty freaked out if I was her. I'd love to talk to her daughter about it, because this was years ago. Her daughter's probably grown up now. I wonder if she remembers it.
Kids and pets, man. They not like they've got a sixth sense, if you will.
Well, like in the beginning of that's weird. Just as you said that, I heard a cat meow. Was that your cat, Madelayne? Or
yeah,
it wasn't mine.
He's being really annoying. I keep muting my mic because he's just pressing his lips to the bottom of the door and meowing
under the door.
Yeah.
Aaron, at the beginning of this, you talked about having an open mind. Do you think it's the fact that a child would have such a wide open mind that they're maybe more welcoming an interaction with the beyond?
I can see that, like, a child would have probably a more of an ability to see if there is supernatural spirits around us. I could see children being in the right frame of mind to be susceptible to seeing them.
Mm-hmm.
So I can kind of wrap my mind around that. But what I think's happening here is that there's a neighbor that's just telling the kid that she's the mom. And she's just,
like, to screw with her.
No, I think it's something to do with the neighbor and the mother when she was alive. Had some kind of a rivalry, like she was always jealous of her life, and she was always there was a lot of history there. And so now that she's gone, this woman is trying to get back at her in weird ways.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay. You think it is maybe a neighborly rivalry, and maybe the rivalry involved like who was the better cook and who had the better recipes, and the neighbor is using the idea that tricking the daughter into thinking she's Pete's mom to get intel on the recipe book, maybe that she always wanted to get. And when she died, she's like, the neighbor's like, she's gonna take the recipe book with her.
Yeah. Maybe at the church bake sale, it was always her brownies that were bought first and sold out over the neighbor's brownies, and everybody at the church community events would just rave about Pete's mom's brownies and how they're the best, and that drove her crazy, and
she killed her.
And she killed her with a shotgun.
Yeah. So searched the house high and low for the recipe book, could not find it.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Yeah. Mystery solved. We got one coming up here that I'm really excited to hear. This actually, when I put out the call out for listener contributed ghost stories, this is the first one that I got, and I after listening to it, I'm like, this is going to be hard to top. This is, we'll call the story Heather's Father's Wrath. This is a 1980s ghost story. This happened to Heather in the 80s. And in this case, Heather's fairly certain who the ghost is, and Heather's fairly certain why the ghost is so upset. Listen to this.
Hi, Jordan. I have a creepy Halloween story for you. When I was 16, I found out that I was pregnant, and then 4 days later, my father unexpectedly passed away. He was ill, but he wasn't on his deathbed or anything. So the only person that I had told in my family was my sister-in-law, and I kind of swore her to secrecy because of all that was going on. I was planning on telling my parents, but certainly wasn't going to do that at that time. So anyways, after the funeral, my dad's funeral, I was over at the neighbor's place hanging out with the younger daughter. She was about 12 or 13, and she and her friend were playing with a Ouija board. And so I was sitting there all skeptic. And anyways, they were asking it simple things that they both knew the answer to. So I said, well, why don't you ask it a question that you don't really know the answer to?
Just want to stop there for 1 second. Imagine your friend is at your house. They just had their father's funeral, and you're like, what do you want to do? I don't know. Let's pull out the Ouija board. It seems like an awful idea.
Yeah. Are you sure you wouldn't want to play Settlers of Catan? Do we have to go Ouija board right now?
Well, they went Ouija board, so let's pick up the story there.
Anyways, they were asking it simple things that they both knew the answer to. So I said, well, why don't you ask it a question that you don't really know the answer to? And they both looked at me and they said, well, why don't you pick a question? So the neighbor girl's parents had attended the service, but not the burial. And neither of the two children that were my friends, they weren't present for any part of the events. Their family used the local cemetery, and both children had only ever been to visit their grandparents' graves, and not even very often. And where my father was buried was a relatively new cemetery just on the outskirts of the city. So I was almost positive that there was no way either girl would have ever even heard of this place. And if they had have heard of it, they would have known it by the first two names, not the third one, because it was kind of short formed when people were referring to it. Anyways, so I said, tell it to ask where my father's buried. So the words were barely out of my mouth, and that terrifying little disc started shooting all over the board so quickly that the girls were stunned and they were unable to make sense of what was being spelled. I, however, was watching intently, catching every letter as the words Capitol Memorial Gardens were formed, very furiously but very deliberately. There was no mistaking where that little disc was landing, as is often the case from what I'm told by people who use Ouija boards on a regular basis. So both girls were commenting that the disc was heating up at one point, but they kept holding on and intrigued with what it was doing until it became too hot to continue, and they both just let it go. It stopped moving immediately and just kind of rested on the board. So they told me to feel how hot the disc was, and I was barely able to squeak out, no thanks. They were so amazed, and they were trying desperately to sort out the letters to make sense of it all before they turned to me and they asked if I had understood it. And I said that I did, and I said that it was right, and then I said I had to go home. To say that I was completely freaked out was the understatement of my life, and I tried unsuccessfully to clear that from my mind for the rest of the day. I thought I'd been able to do that by the time I went to bed, but I couldn't have been more wrong. So the night of the Ouija board incident, I was sleeping and dreaming about who knows what, when all of a sudden a song started playing. And I was familiar with it. It was Boris the Spider by The Who. And the chorus says, creepy, crawly, creepy, crawly, creepy, creepy, crawly, crawly. And then the octaves kind of go up, and it keeps increasing until it abruptly ends. And I still remember thinking that it was odd that it wasn't ending. And then it reached an intolerable pitch, and all of a sudden, my bed slammed into the wall. And now, there were casters on my bed, so my mother could move it easier when she was making the bed, but there was also a shag carpet, it was the 80s, right? So the bed didn't move any distance very easily. It was just easier to move manually. And I had a double-size headboard with a single bed. So the bed itself was actually a foot from the wall because it sat in the middle of the headboard, the double headboard. So my heart was racing and I was too terrified to open my eyes and see what had really happened. I just remember thinking, like, if I get up and I can't open my door because whatever this is that slammed my bed into the wall is still here, like, what am I going to do? I'm going to freak out. So anyways, all of a sudden, a vision of my father looking absolutely furious, it popped into my head. And I knew then that the energy that moved my bed was him. And he was telling me that he knew my dirty little secret and he was not happy. And as soon as the vision disappeared, I jumped up, opened the door, and bolted as quietly as I could across the hall to my mom's room. But being a light sleeper, she woke up despite my attempt at sneaking into her bed. And she said, "What the hell are you doing?" And so I told her. And she lay there for a second, and then she got up and told me that I was being ridiculous. And she strode out of the room and across the hall. And then I heard a really tiny, and then she returned to her room and walked past me, white as a ghost, didn't say a word. And then she got into her bed. And then she said to me, "Your bed's against the wall." And I go, yeah, I know. That's why I'm here. And she must have felt sorry for me because she let me stay, although she didn't say another word to me that night or the next day. I moved my bed back the next morning. Yes, it was still against the wall. And I was silently apologizing to my dad as I did, acknowledging that his message had been received loud and clear. And I asked him to please refrain from doing that again. And he never did. So I guess he mellowed a bit. And that was almost 40 years ago. And I remember it like it was yesterday, and I probably always will.
So her suspicion, I think, is pretty clear, is that her father knows exactly what is going on within her body and didn't seem to approve of it. Madelayne, as being with baby, what are your thoughts on this story?
Oh, he was pissed from beyond.
That is really mad.
How rude. How rude to haunt her like that.
Or maybe he was trying to congratulate her. Who knows? Maybe he saw something in a 16-year-old that we didn't, and he knew she was going to be able to, pull it together and make the best life possible for her child. Who knows?
Like any father, living or otherwise, this was still very fresh. So I'm sure he got over it really fast. But it was just the initial shock. He was like, first I die, and then I find this out.
Yeah, I just feel like if I died, I mean, this is all speculative and whatever, but say there is a wild afterlife, and there's all this, a can of worms on the other side. And if I died and then instantly found out that my 16-year-old daughter was pregnant, I think I would spend some time wrapping my mind around the can of worms first before I would care about my daughter having a baby. Like, think about everything that's going to be on the other side if all of this is true, right? Think about how much there is to see and do and understand. And then eventually I'd be like, okay, now that I've kind of settled in a little bit to the afterlife, now I'll kind of start looking at what's going on in the regular life and how I feel about it and what I can do about it.
And this is kind of a 2-in-1 story where if it's what she believes and it's her father interacting with her from beyond, he did it in 2 separate ways, both in the same night. He did the Ouija board, which seemed to be like, if her recounting it is exactly true, that sounds horrifying. And like, to the point that the little disc thing even heated up, like, that's a pretty intense Ouija board experience. And then she gets home and the terror continues. I think that is a freaking wild night.
Yeah, I had a similar experience with a Ouija board actually in high school.
Really? Like that made you believe in the...
It certainly gave me
of
pause. Yeah.
Okay.
It was...
Tell me about it.
I'll try to tell as quickly as possible, but we were going over, me and my friend, we were going over to this girl's place, and her and a few of her girlfriends were there. And so there was 3 of us, and then there was a couple of them. And all of a sudden at the last minute, my friend decided that there was a girl there that he was dating, but then there was this other girl he was dating. And he decided to go with the other girl and left me and my other friend to go to the girl's
Wow.
place where
What's your friend's secret?
Yeah. So we got there and we were just hanging out. They're like, where is he? Where is he? Well, how come he didn't come? Blah, 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 blah. And we were just told to say, we don't know. He just, wasn't feeling well or whatever. We were told to lie. So we did. And
well, at least he let you know that you were supposed to lie and didn't just expect you to know.
yeah. He told us exactly what to say. So we went and we told his lies and tried to get on with the night. But the girl that he was seeing that was there was not happy with what we were saying and didn't believe us. So later in the night, someone breaks out a Ouija board and we start playing. And we're just kind of, asking it general things. And all through the night when we were playing with the Ouija board, the lights were off in the kitchen. We kept hearing the very distinct sound of, the sound a cat makes when it jumps off of a table and lands on the floor, the way its paws sound when it lands.
Mm-hmm.
We kept hearing that over and over and over again. And there was no cat there. And so then the girlfriend that was pissed off that was there decides to ask the Ouija board where he is, where our friend is, right?
Oh my God.
So me and my other friend Mitchell were just looking at each other like, this is getting weird. But we never told them where he was, and they didn't know about the other girl, but they were suspecting that something was up. So she asked the Ouija board, and it spelled out the exact address of the other girl's house where he was.
What a way to get caught fooling around.
Yeah.
I love how she was so pissed off. She brought the supernatural into it. She's like, I know something's going on.
Yeah. It was pretty wild. And when we left there that night, me and Mitchell, the other guy, and we just kind of walked home and we're like, man, like, is there any way they could have known her exact address? We were trying to piece it together, and maybe one of them did, but we couldn't really figure it out. And it was the exact address, like the full street address.
Wow.
It's pretty weird.
Wow. Well, and it wasn't a name. The Ouija board didn't give her a name.
No, literally the exact
the
address
location
where he was. Yeah, the location of where he was at that exact moment.
Like probably making out with her at that exact address.
Yeah.
I'm just glad it didn't show a picture or something. That could have been even worse, but wow.
The loyalty of that entity spirit is unmatched.
Yeah.
That's the loyalty I'm looking for in a friend.
Yeah, it would have been funny if it just like, where is John right now, and the Ouija board spells out makeout point, and it's just
the makeout point. Yeah. Well, let's start wrapping this up. We've heard a whole bunch of stories tonight. Is there any that are going to be taken home with you and keep you awake tonight, Madelayne?
The one with the dad that was quite clearly very angry. Okay. It's hard to deny something like that.
Mm-hmm. And do you think it maybe also affects you a little different being with baby? That's what I like to call pregnant with baby.
Maybe.
How did your dad take it? Surely you've told him by now, right?
Oh yes. Yeah. Well, his eyes just got really wide because I think he didn't ever think I'd have kids. But yeah, no, he was, mind you, keep in mind, I'm 30 and married. So
it's kind of a different ball game.
Yeah. But yeah, he just kind of, he was surprised for sure, but I think he's excited. He's a lot like my husband in the sense that he doesn't show a ton of emotion, but he really likes my nephew. He's very taken with my sister's kid. So
okay.
I think he's excited. Yeah.
Aaron, which of these stories are going to haunt you?
I think the one from Sweden was the one that was the most difficult to try and explain from any logical kind of standpoint. So yeah, that one sticks with me.
And it seems like we only got the tip of the iceberg in that story as well. Because she's like, there's so much more to say. I don't even have time to get into all the little things that happened here. So yeah, that one is complicated. I think for me, it is Sherry's story of her daughter. I don't believe your hypothesis that it had to do with feuding neighbors. I think Sherry's daughter was able to communicate with something that Sherry herself couldn't. I don't know. The idea that a child or a pet can see this stuff or feel this stuff that we can't. Maybe something happens and me as an adult, I experience it and I'm like, that's crazy. But a child, they wouldn't have those kind of biases. So maybe they're more open to it and allow it in. So I think it's that one.
Well, and kids don't know that they should be scared yet.
That's
because
true.
fear taught. So they might see like a ghost or a spirit and just really not think anything of it.
Maybe you're right.
Yeah.
Madelayne, you and I have done encounters with creeps. This is kind of like a weird take on that style of show. How do you feel with getting listener contributed ghost stories?
Oh, I love this. This is great. As long as it doesn't happen to me, I'm good.
But if it does happen to you, will you send a voice memo through nighttimepodcast.com/contact, and then me and Aaron can talk about it?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, you can't get rid of me. So
this is our Halloween special. Do either of you have anything to say about the upcoming holiday?
I hope I don't get that many kids so that I can eat most of the candy.
You're so awful.
Yeah, that is a good part of Halloween. I hope I get at least a handful of kids this year with the 0 from last year. So because I'm still buying candy.
I always give away the candy I don't like first.
Oh, do you really?
Yeah. I do.
I don't buy candy I don't like because I'm like, whatever's left, I'm gonna go crazy. So, actually, I bought the chips I bought this year were cheesies because they're on sale. I'm not crazy about cheesies, but they don't really have I like Doritos, and you don't really get many options that have a bunch of Doritos. So.
Well, what kind of cheesies are we talking here? Are we talking like the puffy ones, the hard ones, or like the really gross Hawkins ones?
Are you talking like Cheetos is probably what you're talking about.
Yeah,
I'm talking like actual cheese. I think on the bag it says cheese sticks. They're the puffy ones.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
I like
them. I don't love them. I like the crunchets, what you describe. I think the ones you were saying, the crunchy ones.
The super crunchy ones?
Those are the Cheetos, right?
I like those ones.
I like the cheesies. We always, as the puffy ones, as kids, we always call them cheesies.
Yeah. I'm weird though. I like them a little stale.
Yeah, they're great stale.
Okay, cool. Good.
Absolutely. The bag open the next day, leave it open 24 hours, and then go to town.
That's what I'm like with marshmallows. I like every so often you find in the back of a cupboard marshmallows from last year and they're dried out and hard. That is delicious.
I get roasted when I tell my friends this. They're like, that's disgusting. I'm like, no, marshmallows and cheesies. Those are leave them open.
Have you ever met someone who keeps chips in the fridge?
No, I've never seen that.
Okay.
No, that's grounds for ridicule for sure.
Okay. I don't do it, but I know someone who does. I'm not going to say their name on air.
You've got a fridge full of chips right now. I know you do. You were just praying that we were going to be like, I do that too. Yeah, you're so normal.
Oh, man. I'm not going to admit to anything. Let's wrap this up. This was an amazing Halloween special. A massive thank you to everyone who contributed their stories. I look forward to doing it again next year. 360 something sleeps till we can do this again. I hope you both have a happy Halloween.
Yes. You as well.
Happy and safe. No tricks, I guess, as Aaron would put it.
No tricks, only treats. But some people find tricks to be the treat, so it gets complicated.
I guess that's what you're into.
Yeah. I just want to keep the teenagers happy.
I was gonna say, just be aware of the teens and keep them at bay.
Yes. Give them, if you're hoarding any of the quality candy, give it to them when they come to the door because they know.
I want to thank you for joining us on this spooky evening of existential terror. Now, before we part here, let me end with some thanks. First, a massive and sincere thank you to everyone who shared their stories with us. You all stole the show just as I expected you would. I just hope the three of us did your stories justice. I have a big thanks to Aaron and Madelayne for sharing their time with me and with you, the listeners of Nighttime. A shout out to LJ from the Dystopian Simulation podcast, who provides the intro and outro narration, and Monty Datta, who provides the music for this series. And lastly, but most importantly, a massive thank you goes out to each and every one of you listening to Nighttime, as without your interest and your support, this show would be as pointless as it would be impossible. And on the topic of support, I want to specifically thank the newest subscribers of the premium feed. Leslie, Bailey, and Trish, thank you for going premium. And for anyone else who'd like to support the show but isn't currently subscribed to the premium feed, you can help us out in a couple ways here. First of all, a premium feed subscription costs just a couple dollars a month, and that money funds the creation of the show. But perhaps more importantly, the premium feed gives you the episodes 2 days early, gives them to you ad-free, and gives you access to a full back catalog of Nighttime episodes. If that sounds like something you'd like, you can go premium at patreon.com/nighttimepodcast. But if you don't want to go premium, you can still help the show for free by simply sharing this episode on social media and letting all your like-minded friends know what we're doing here. If anyone listening has any story ideas, wants to give feedback on the show, or would like to give an opinion or some thoughts on any of the stories we heard tonight, you can do all that and more at nighttimepodcast.com. We look forward to hearing from you. But until then, take care of each other, hug your loved ones tight, and have a happy Halloween.
The Nighttime Podcast is written, hosted, and produced by Jordan Bonaparte.